The arrival of insignificance. The Kreth swarm emerged from subspace like a plague of locusts made manifest in the void. 12 billion bioships, each one a living organism bred for war, filled the space beyond Neptune with their writhing masses. They moved as one consciousness, a hive mind that had consumed 16 star systems in its relentless expansion across the galaxy. The overmind, the collective consciousness that guided them all, pulsed with anticipation as it gazed upon the blue marble that would be their next feast. Earth hung in space, deceptively peaceful, its surface crawling with 8 billion souls who had no idea that death itself had come calling, or so the overmind believed. The bioships arranged themselves in attack formations that had broken the will of entire civilizations. Their organic hulls secreted acids that could dissolve metal, their weapon pods pregnant with spores that could transform entire ecosystems into Kreth breeding grounds. This was not conquest. This was consumption, pure and absolute. Yet as the swarm settled into position, something peculiar happened. Nothing. No panicked broadcasts filled the electromagnetic spectrum. No military vessels scrambled from the planet's surface. The orbital traffic around Earth continued its mundane dance, cargo haulers and passenger liners following their prescribed routes as if 12 billion predators hadn't just materialized in their backyard. The overmind rippled with confusion, its billion voices speaking as one through the neural pathways that connected every ship. They had been noticed, surely. No species could be so blind as to miss the arrival of the swarm. Perhaps these humans were paralyzed with fear, their primitive minds unable to process the magnitude of their doom. A small maintenance vessel, barely larger than a single Kreth warrior drone, puttered past the swarm's outer edge. Its pilot, an older woman named Chen Wei, was listening to classical music while she performed routine repairs on a communications satellite. She glanced at her sensors, noted the unusual readings with mild interest, and filed an automated report with the Sol System Traffic Authority about potential navigation hazards in the outer system. Then she went back to her welding, humming along to Beethoven's Ninth. The overmind detected the scan, felt the casual dismissal, and experienced something it had never felt in its million-year existence: bewilderment. In the offices of the Sol System Traffic Authority, junior analyst Robert Park received Chen Wei's report along with 16,000 others that hour. The system's AI had already categorized it as low priority, unidentified biological matter in the outer system, probably another pod of space whales migrating through. They'd been getting more of those lately since the protection laws had been enacted. Park glanced at the data, noted the unusual size of the cluster, and forwarded it to the Environmental Protection Division with a note: large biomass detected near Neptune. Possible protected species. Please investigate. The overmind decided that demonstration was required. These humans clearly didn't understand what they were facing. 1,000 bioships broke formation, their bodies glowing with bioluminescent displays that had sent entire worlds into panic. The light show was visible from Earth's surface, a dancing aurora of death that painted the night sky in shades of inevitable doom. On Earth, millions of people looked up at the unexpected light show. Social media exploded with photos and videos. Amateur astronomers debated whether it was a new type of solar phenomenon, or perhaps a marketing stunt for the upcoming Mars colony expansion. The hashtag NeptuneL lights trended globally for exactly 3 hours before being replaced by a scandal involving a celebrity's pet robot. Dr. Marcus Thompson, Earth's senior xenobiologist, received a priority message from the Traffic Authority about the biological mass near Neptune. He pulled up the data while eating lunch at his desk, his sandwich dripping mustard onto his lab coat. The readings were certainly interesting. Definitely organic, definitely alien, definitely massive. But after 40 years of first contacts, he'd learned not to jump to conclusions. Thompson initiated the standard first contact protocol, which began with attempting to establish basic communication. He transmitted mathematical sequences, music, and linguistic samples toward the biomass. Then, following regulations, he scheduled a follow-up for the next day and went back to his real priority: figuring out why the Martian fungi samples kept eating through their containers. The overmind received the transmission with growing agitation. Mathematics? Music? These humans were trying to teach them basic concepts as if the swarm were simple-minded creatures, instead of the galaxy's apex predators. The insult burned through every neural link. Fine, if subtle demonstration wouldn't work, perhaps something more direct was needed. 10,000 bioships surged forward, their bodies secreting combat pheromones that could be detected across light minutes of space. They stopped just beyond the orbit of Uranus, weapon pods swelling with deadly spores. The Overmind broadcast its ultimatum using every frequency it knew, a psychic scream that had broken the will of hardened warriors. Surrender or be consumed. You have one rotation of your world to comply. At the United Nations Space Command, Admiral Jennifer Rodriguez was in the middle of a budget meeting when her aide interrupted with news of the transmission. She listened to the message, her expression never changing from the bored annoyance she'd worn while discussing fuel expenditures. Rodriguez turned to her aide. "Send them the standard packet." The aide nodded and transmitted humanity's official first contact documentation, a 9,000-page document covering trade regulations, immigration requirements, diplomatic protocols, quarantine procedures, and taxation guidelines. At the end was a simple note. Please complete all forms in triplicate and submit to the appropriate departments. Processing time is typically 90–180 business days. The Overmind's billion consciousnesses tried to process the document simultaneously and immediately regretted it. The bureaucratic language was somehow more toxic than any weapon they'd encountered. Entire sections contradicted each other. Form 247B required information from Form 883C, which couldn't be completed without first submitting Form 101A, which was apparently discontinued 6 years ago but still legally required. While the swarm reeled from their encounter with human bureaucracy, life on Earth continued unchanged. Stock markets opened and closed. Children went to school. In Mumbai, Rashan Patel celebrated his daughter's birthday with a party that featured a bounce house shaped like a rocket ship. In São Paulo, Maria Santos won her local football league's championship. In Toronto, David Kim finally worked up the courage to ask his crush on a date. The Overmind convulsed with frustration. These humans weren't just ignoring them. They were treating the swarm as a minor inconvenience, something to be handled by automated systems and junior bureaucrats. The collective consciousness of 12 billion organisms, the terror of the galaxy, had been reduced to paperwork. Something had to change. The humans had to be made to understand. A single bioship, one of the swarm's most decorated warrior organisms, broke from formation and accelerated toward Earth. It would fire upon one of their orbital platforms, a minor military installation. Not enough to cause significant damage, but enough to prove the swarm meant business. The bioship never made it past Mars. As it crossed into what humanity designated as the Inner System Defense Zone, it triggered approximately 47 different automated defense protocols. The bioship found itself bombarded with warning messages in 300 languages, targeted by traffic management systems trying to redirect it to proper shipping lanes, and flagged by 17 different insurance companies as a liability risk. When it failed to respond to automated warnings, a single defense drone the size of a small car intercepted it. The drone didn't fire weapons. Instead, it deployed what humans called a compliance field, essentially a localized space-time distortion that made it physically impossible for the bioship to continue on its current course. The bioship found itself gently but firmly redirected back to the outer system, like a drunk being escorted out of a bar by a bouncer who wasn't even paying attention. The warrior organism returned to the swarm in disgrace, its bioluminescent patches flickering with shame. The Overmind absorbed its memories, analyzing every nanosecond of the encounter. The defense drone hadn't even been piloted. It was completely automated, following protocols that seemed designed more for traffic management than warfare. The education of conquerors. The Overmind called for a gathering of its deepest consciousnesses, the ancient voices that had guided the swarm for millennia. They pooled their collective knowledge, trying to understand these impossible humans. In 16 conquered systems, the pattern had been the same: arrival, demonstration, panic, surrender, or consumption. But these humans had turned their greatest moment into a bureaucratic inconvenience. Meanwhile, on Earth, the situation had finally reached someone with actual authority. Dr. Sarah Winters, Director of Extraterrestrial Relations, reviewed the files while drinking her third cup of coffee that morning. She'd dealt with aggressive species before, the Zafrani who communicated only through combat, the mollusk confederation that considered eating other sentients a form of greeting, and those unfortunate beings from Proxima who reproduced by exploding. Winters opened a secure channel to Admiral Rodriguez. We've got another one of those conquest types in the outer system. The biomass near Neptune. Rodriguez sighed audibly over the comm. How bad? 12 billion individual organisms acting as a hive mind. They're threatening consumption of our entire species. Winters took another sip of coffee. Pretty standard stuff, really. Great, just great. I've got the Mars miners threatening to strike, 3 cargo companies fighting over shipping routes, and now this.
Can you handle it? Give me a diplomatic cruiser and a xenopsych team.
I'll have them sorted by end of week. The Overmind, still reeling from its failed demonstration, detected a single human vessel approaching. Not a warship, but something designated as a diplomatic cruiser, the DSV Mediator. It was unremarkable in every way. Its hull scarred from hundreds of previous missions, its weapons minimal. This was to be Earth's response to the swarm, one elderly vessel. The Mediator stopped at a respectful distance and transmitted a simple message. Greetings. I'm Dr. Sarah Winters from Earth. I understand you're interested in consuming our planet. Would you like to discuss terms? The Overmind's billion voices screamed in unison. There are no terms, only consumption. Your species will feed the swarm. I understand, Winters replied calmly. But before we proceed, I need you to understand something. Computer display file 77 alpha. The space around the Mediator lit up with holographic projections. The Overmind watched as humanity's recent history unfolded before them. They saw the arrival of the Zafrani war fleet, 200 ships that had conquered dozens of worlds. The humans had disabled their weapon systems with a computer virus disguised as a pizza delivery menu. The Zafrani now ran the most successful chain of restaurants in the Sol system. They saw the Mollusk Confederation's invasion, 5 billion strong, that had ended when humans discovered the invaders were deathly allergic to chocolate. Earth's children had literally defeated them with Halloween candy. They saw species after species arrive at Earth with hostile intent, only to be neutralized not through violence but through humanity's strangest weapon, bureaucratic integration. The conquering Zerath Empire now operated Earth's most efficient postal service. The warrior clans of Rigel 7 had become addicted to human soap operas and now produced their own. You see, Winters explained, we've been invaded 17 times in the last 50 years. We stopped taking it personally after the 5th. Now it's just paperwork. The Overmind pulsed with indignation. We are not like the others. We are the swarm. We have consumed entire systems. I'm sure you have, Winters said, her voice carrying the patient tone of a kindergarten teacher dealing with a tantrum. But here's the thing about Earth. We've got 8 billion humans down there, and each one is basically a self-contained crisis generation unit. Do you know what we were doing when you arrived? She didn't wait for an answer. We had 17 different wars going on, not against aliens, but against each other. We had an economic crisis in 3 sectors, a climate catastrophe on 2 continents, and someone had just released a viral video of a cat that looked like it was singing opera. That got more attention than your arrival. The Mediator's computers transmitted more data. The Overmind saw Earth's defensive systems, not the automated drones, but the real defenses. Orbital platforms that could generate black holes. Quantum computers that could rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas. Weapons that didn't destroy enemies but transformed them into productive members of society. But more terrifying than the weapons was the data about human psychology. These creatures thrived on chaos. They had evolved on a world that regularly tried to kill them with storms, earthquakes, plagues, and ice ages. They had spent their entire history fighting each other. And when they finally achieved space travel, their first thought wasn't peace. It was to find new things to fight. And they had turned that instinct into a bureaucracy. Here's what I'm offering, Winters said. Option 1, you can try to invade. Our defense systems will activate, not the automated ones you've already seen, but the real ones, the ones we keep for actual threats. You might destroy a few cities, maybe even a continent. But then 8 billion humans will take it personally, and trust me, you don't want that. She paused to let that sink in. Option 2, you fill out the proper paperwork, register as a resident species, and we find you a nice spot in the outer system. Jupiter's moons are mostly empty, and the radiation there might suit your biology. You can have Europa. The dolphins we uplifted decided they didn't like it. The Overmind's billion voices whispered among themselves. This wasn't conquest or surrender. It was something far more insidious, integration. The humans weren't fighting the swarm. They were offering to make them part of the system. But we are conquerors, the Overmind protested, though with noticeably less force than before. So were the Zafrani. Now they make excellent pizza. The Zirath were destroyers. Now they deliver packages. The Mollusk Confederation were devourers. Now they run a chain of sushi restaurants. Ethically sourced, of course. Winters brought up another display. Look, I'll be honest with you. Earth is exhausting. We've got hundreds of species living here now. All of them originally came to conquer us. You know what they're doing now? Paying taxes, attending PTA meetings, arguing about parking spaces. One of the most feared warriors in the galaxy just got elected to our local school board. She ran on a platform of improving lunch nutrition. The Overmind felt something it had never experienced before. Existential doubt. For 1,000,000 years, the swarm had defined itself by consumption and conquest. But these humans were offering something far more terrifying than defeat. They were offering normalcy. What if we refuse? The Overmind asked, its billion voices reduced to a whisper. Winters shrugged, the gesture visible on the communication feed. Then you go on the list. What list? The list of species that refused integration. We send them a fruit basket every year on the anniversary of their attempted invasion. The Crimson Armada still hasn't responded to ours, but we keep sending them anyway. It's only polite. The Overmind consulted its deepest memories, its most ancient voices. The Crimson Armada had been legendary conquerors, feared across half the galaxy. They had disappeared 50 years ago after attempting to invade a small system on the galactic rim. That system had been Sol. What happened to them? The Overmind asked, though it dreaded the answer. They're living in the asteroid belt. They formed a mining collective. Very efficient operation. Their warrior king just had his first grandchild. He sends us pictures. The swarm writhed in space, 12 billion organisms trying to process this information. They had come to consume, to add Earth's biomass to their own. Instead, they were being offered jobs, housing, and presumably tax obligations. I need to consult with my collective, the Overmind said. Take your time, Winters replied. But not too much time. The housing market around Jupiter is heating up. The Andromedans just put in an application for Ganymede. As the mediator waited, the Overmind reached a consensus that would have been unthinkable an hour ago. The swarm had survived for 1,000,000 years by adapting, by consuming and integrating new genetic material. Perhaps it was time to integrate something else, a new way of existence. We accept option 2, the Overmind transmitted, its voices heavy with resignation. Excellent. Winter's enthusiasm seemed genuine. I'll send over the paperwork. You'll need to designate a representative for the UN. Get yourselves registered with the tax authority and, oh, this is important, you'll need to choose a name for your species that fits on standard forms. The swarm that consumes all is way too long. And so the Kreth swarm, terror of 16 systems, became the newest residents of the Sol system. Within 6 months, they had established a thriving agriculture operation on Europa. Their bioships proving excellent at water purification. Within a year, they were complaining about their neighbors. The Zafrani had opened a restaurant on Io that was too noisy, and participating in the solar system's governance. The Overmind, now calling itself Kevin for bureaucratic simplicity, served on the Jupiter Sector Planning Commission. Its billion voices were particularly effective at processing permit applications. And somewhere in the galaxy, other conquering species heard the stories. The Sol system, that insignificant spot on the rim where conquerors went to become citizens, where armies became neighbors, where the greatest weapon wasn't a planet killer or a star destroyer, but a 40-page visa application. Earth spun on, its 8 billion inhabitants largely unaware that they had once again avoided extinction through the simple expedient of being too chaotic, too bureaucratic, and too genuinely welcoming to bother with proper warfare. After all, they had more important things to worry about. The Mars miners were still threatening to strike.